Once upon a time in Benin City, Nigeria, there was a woman known as Mrs. Clara. She ran a cool beer parlor business where people enjoyed drinking beer and sodas. One day, she bought a new refrigerator from a company to keep her drinks chilled. Little did she know, trouble was brewing. Just 2 days after getting the refrigerator, disaster hit. The fridge caught fire, leaving Mrs. Clara shocked. It was supposed to make things cool, not set her business on fire. However, Mrs. Clara didn't give up. She called the company that sold the refrigerator to her and complained about the problem. The company sent someone to fix it. The fridge got repaired, but Mrs. Clara had no idea that a bigger problem was coming. 6 months later, on a hot August afternoon, the refrigerator exploded. It caused a lot of injuries and hurt Mrs. Clara badly. The thing that was supposed to keep things cool has turned into a dangerous problem. Mrs. Clara, now devastated, decided to seek justice. She called her lawyers, who sued the refrigerator company, and the legal battle began. In court, the judge wanted to know 2 important things before she took her decision. First was whether the company knew that Mrs. Clara was using the fridge for her beer parlor business. And second was whether the company made promises that the fridge was fit for its purpose. The judge and her findings discovered that the company was wrong. They knew that Mrs. Clara used the fridge for her business, and they promised her that it was okay. The judge said that the law provided that the company owed a duty of care to Mrs. Clara, and so they were supposed to make sure the refrigerator was good for her. But the company's lawyer argued that it was Mrs. Clara's fault too, that she contributed to the cause of the explosion. But the judge didn't buy it. The company needed to prove that Mrs. Clara did something wrong, but they couldn't. The judge said that the company was more responsible for the problem. The judge finally made a strong decision. She believed Mrs. Clara and said that the company was careless, and that the company's carelessness caused Mrs. Clara's injuries. The judge finally gave judgment in favor of Mrs. Clara and asked the company to pay her for the damages she had suffered as a result of the explosion. The company was not happy with the decision of the court, so they went on appeal to the Court of Appeal to change the decision. But the Court of Appeal also said no. The company could not escape the trouble they had caused Mrs. Clara. Also not happy with the Court of Appeal's decision, the company appealed to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. The justices of the Supreme Court carefully examined the case before them and said that the company had to pay for what they did. The company's excuse that they were just sellers of the refrigerator and not the makers was rejected by the Supreme Court. The court held that everyone in the distribution chain of the refrigerator needed to be careful, even the sellers. The company was therefore mandated to pay for Mrs. Clara's injury, and justice was done. Mrs. Clara's story sent shockwaves through the business world. The court's decision wasn't just a win for one woman. It became a shield for consumers everywhere. Corporations now had to think twice before delivering faulty products, realizing that consumers held the power of justice. The end.